Hey, welcome to the show. Today, we're diving deep into a conflict that's happening all around us right now, but it's happening in the shadows, almost completely invisible. We are deconstructing the world of cyber warfare.
So, just for a second, forget about tanks, forget about fighter jets. What if the most powerful weapon, the one that could decide the next global conflict, wasn't a bomb, but just a few lines of code? A weapon that could shut down a power grid or empty a bank without a single shot being fired. That's the crazy reality we're exploring today.
Okay, first things first. We've got to get past the Hollywood stereotype, the hacker in a dark hoodie furiously typing. The real tools of digital conflict are way more sophisticated. So let's break down the actual arsenal being used on this new battlefield.
Let's start with the official definition because the key words here are strategic deployment. See, this isn't just random hacking. Cyber warfare is calculated, it's planned. It's all about using digital attacks to cause real-world damage and achieve real-world goals, whether that's taking down critical infrastructure or scrambling a military's ability to communicate.
Now, the most common weapon you've probably heard of is malware. You can think of it as the ammunition in this digital war. It's really just a catch-all term for any software that's designed to cause trouble. And this can be anything from a simple little virus all the way up to something incredibly complex, like the Stuxnet worm, which was built to physically destroy centrifuges in Iran's nuclear program.
Then you've got DDoS attacks.
Now, these aren't a surgical strike. They're more like creating a massive digital traffic jam. The whole point is to flood a target, say a government website or your online bank, with so much junk traffic that nobody legit can get through. It's a weapon of pure disruption.
And that brings us to the special forces of the cyber world, advanced persistent threats, or APTs. We're not talking about a quick smash and grab here. An APT is a long-game intelligence operation. It's where a super skilled group, usually backed by a government, quietly breaks into a network and just sits there. They can stay hidden for months, sometimes years, just gathering info, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. So you can see why understanding the intent behind an attack is so crucial. On one side, you have opportunistic attacks. Think of these like casting a huge fishing net. They're automated, broad, and just looking for any common weakness they can find. But on the other side, you've got targeted attacks. These are like a sniper's bullet, custom designed to hit one specific vulnerability in a really important system.
All right, so now that we know the weapons, the next big question is, who's actually firing them? Who's behind the keyboard? And believe me, the answer is a whole lot more complicated than you might think. Let's unmask the players in this new kind of conflict.
This battlefield is, well, it's crowded. You have the major powers, of course, the nation-states with huge budgets and powerful intelligence agencies. But then you've also got non-state proxies, these groups that do a government's dirty work. You've got politically motivated hacktivists, terrorist organizations, military alliances like NATO, and more, even huge private companies.
And this is where things get really clever and really messy. Why would a country use a proxy group? One simple reason: plausible deniability. If some unaffiliated group launches an attack, the government that secretly sponsored them can just throw their hands up and say, hey, wasn't us. It creates this thick fog of war, making it almost impossible to prove who's really to blame.
You know, this quote from our source material really just nails it. It's not a simple case of us versus them. It's a complex ecosystem. Everybody has different reasons for being in the fight: money, politics, national security, you name it. And if you don't understand that, you can't really understand cyber conflict.
Okay, so if you've got all these new weapons and this tangled web of players, how on earth do you apply any rules? Well, that brings us to the legal Wild West, a place that experts call the gray zone, where old laws are desperately trying to catch up with new tech. See, most of what happens in cyber warfare takes place in this gray zone. These are hostile acts for sure, but they fall just short of what we would normally call an act of war. It's this murky space where countries can constantly poke and prod each other, causing real disruption, but without triggering an all-out military response. It's conflict below the boiling point. To try and bring some clarity to all of this gray, a group of international law experts created something called the Tullen Manual. And to give you an idea of the sheer scale of this challenge, they came up with 154 distinct rules just to begin figuring out how international law even applies here. 154. And that's just the starting point. A huge concept they had to wrestle with was sovereignty. I mean, what does it even mean to violate a country's borders in cyberspace? They broke it down into 3 layers. You could attack the physical layer, That's the actual hardware, the cables, the servers. Or you could hit the logical layer, the code and the connections. Or you could go after the social layer, the actual people and groups using it all.
Which, of course, leads us to the billion-dollar question. This is the one that generals and lawyers are arguing about right now. If a line of code can cause a nationwide blackout or crash a stock market, at what point does that digital action equal a physical attack? When does it cross the line and become an act of war?
And the answer, at least for now, pretty much boils down to two words: scale and effects. The idea is that it doesn't matter what weapon you use. What matters are the consequences. If a cyber attack causes the same kind of damage, destruction, or death as a traditional military strike, like a bombing, then it can be treated as one. The effect is everything.
All right, let's put all the pieces together for our final section. A major cyber attack from a country isn't just a random event. No, it's the very last step in a long, detailed, top-down plan. So let's take a look at the blueprint for how these things are actually built.
Experts call it a multi-echelon framework, and you can think of it like a cascade. It all starts way at the top, at the policy level. This is the big picture, a nation's grand strategy. That high-level policy then flows down to the strategic level, where they plan long-term campaigns. From there, it goes to the operational level, where they figure out how to actually do it. And only then, at the very bottom, do you get to the tactical level. That's the specific malware, the actual code, the hacker at the keyboard. It all flows down from a national goal to a single line of code.
So, after all that, the weapons, the players, the rules, the master plans, what's the big takeaway? What does this all mean for the future of conflict? If you remember one thing, make it this. Cyber warfare has fundamentally blurred all the lines. The clear boundary between war and peace, it's fuzzy now. The line between an offensive attack and a defensive action, blurred. And the distinction between a nation's army and a proxy group acting on its behalf, that's getting blurrier every single day. And that leaves us with one last massive question for the future. We're just getting a handle on this human-driven battlefield. But now, as artificial intelligence enters the fight on both sides, we have to ask, will the next great war be fought by soldiers at all? Or will it be a war fought between autonomous algorithms at machine speed in a conflict that we humans can't even see?
Thank you so much for watching this video. Please subscribe to YouTube channel Macro Syntax for more informed videos.